One of the most spiritual experiences I've had has actually been at a Trippie Red concert. Back in 2021, around mid September, I went to a concert that he had in Atlanta when I was living back near Atlanta at the time. And I remember the effects of that concert was so profound that to this day I kind of have like a reminder, like a physical token reminder of that day. Um, that reminds me of what I experienced and what I learned from my time being there at the concert. I remember before we had walked in, we being me and a friend that I had invited. I remember that the presence of just the energy at the concert was so strong that from like miles away in a parking lot where the car was parked, we could kind of feel the energy and the vibe from loud drums banging from inside the concert that were telling us kind of, where the concert was, but also giving us kind of a sense of what to expect. And I remember also that kind of had very weird experiences just even getting to the venue in the first place. There was, issues getting an Uber. Once we did find a random person to give us a ride, they didn't know where to take us. Then we had issues actually getting past the gate because the barcode for the tickets wasn't working. And it was just a kind of like a whole lot of mess, which I feel like I didn't understand. But also at the same time, I think in turn, it allowed me to come in at the exact time I need to be there. And the exact time I showed up at my seat placing, which was a VIP seat placing, which was pretty good. It was pretty good view of Trippie Red and the stage. And in that placing, at the exact time I came in, Trippie Red came on stage. And I remember everyone, was going crazy. All the fans are going crazy in the crowd. And I'm just there to have a good time, essentially. But little did I know, how much I would learn afterwards and how much it would be more of a learning experience and a spiritual experience at that rather than something just fun that I could write off on the books and call it a day. And I remember I was at the concert, and when I was there, after some period of time, I started to notice that pretty much everyone was on some type of psychedelic or drug. And the people who were like security and workers at that event, I think were also aware of this, so much so where they kind of were like, they were there, but they weren't there. Like, they knew, like, if people did something out of line, they could correct it. But if it was something like along the lines of just their mental state because they were on drugs or whatever, it was kind of like a blurred line in a sense. They weren't really doing too much when it came to that, when it came to those kind of actions. And I remember there was a point where there was an intermission. For those of you who don't know what an intermission was, it's kind of like a break and a pause and like a musical act or performance where the cast or the main performer goes off stage and kind of has a break, and people in the crowd can also have a break as well. So we had a break. Trippie Red came off the stage, and during the intermission, that was like, it was very profound. And I remember Trippie Red or his team, whoever it may be, had started showing these psychedelic colors, patterns, and lights on the stage and the screen, and playing this kind of ongoing, repeating same frequency over and over and over again. And not even 30 seconds or a minute into this sound, I started to feel very weird. And I look around me and I kind of just see like everyone swaying and swaying and swaying, kind of like in like a trance. Even though this may sound very weird, it sounded like, even though this may sound very weird in my experience, like for audiences hearing my story currently right now, that was the point where it made me realize that it was a spiritual experience and that there may be something demonic at play with Trippie Red and his music in general. I feel like I was a spiritual person before that concert, but that even pushed me to be even more spiritual afterwards. And then the second point I wanted to touch on was in regards to the people in the crowd. There was one person in particular. his name shall not be known, where he seemed to know Trippie Redd personally, but he was still a fan and someone who had a ticket that was in the crowd. But with that being said, he seemed like he had been to multiple Trippie Redd concerts, but he was probably one of the most influenced people I saw in the concert as far as like drugs. He was pretty much out of it, and I remember he ended up somehow getting on stage with Trippie Redd. He couldn't even hold himself up, very like discombobulated and out of it, all for the purposes of, I guess, quote unquote, enjoying the concert. And I also thought that was weird. I thought it was interesting that people felt like they couldn't enjoy his music without being under the influence, or almost as if that was part of what involved the partaking of what I would consider the ceremony, or the ceremony that Trippie Redd had introduced to the crowd. And later on, towards the end, Trippie Redd had made a tribute to a former rapper who passed away called XXX. And I remember there was like kind of a pause and a silence in the crowd, and for remembrance of him, which I think was not a bad thing. But it was also at around the same time he had decided to start calling out people in the crowd and I guess declaring their deaths. So he would call out a random guy and be like, "You're gonna die." And he would call out a random girl and be like, "You're gonna die tomorrow." Or anyone he saw in the crowd, and just point at them. My belief, I feel like, is they weren't random people. I feel like maybe his power and his energy to persuade people so much, he was declaring upon them kind of like bad energy or demonic energy, which could in turn constitute to real deaths and, you know, real consequences that are near-death experiences. And I remember after that, he started, you know, singing his song called Death. He started singing his song called Death. And part of the song says, "You gon' die, pause, you gon' die." So those two lines are kind of like the hook of the song. And it wasn't that I didn't know the lyrics or know what he was saying, but it wasn't until after that concert that I realized what the impact of what he was saying had on other people and other young people around my age. And I remember leaving the concert kind of just like out of it, and I kind of felt like I wasn't really a Trippie Redd fan anymore. And it's so interesting to think that a concert for someone you kind of look up to and adore and admire push you to not be a fan of them anymore, so much so that I left just feeling like off. Like I felt like I needed something positive and reinforcing to kind of fill me back up. And after that, I became very mindful of the things I was listening to more than I did in the past. And I believe that experience led me to understand that music has a strong presence and a strong power, and people sometimes in positions of being performers or having high influence upon fans may not realize their impact upon a crowd and realize the spiritual elements that may be at play when performing and giving acts and giving music to the world.